Hi everyone, welcome to the 2020 Akim virtual trek, during which we'll take you to places that no Akim trekker has ever gone before. We thought we'd take the opportunity to go to a few locations that we couldn't trek to, and so we chose the Arava, and we selected sites between Eilat and the Dead Sea, starting in Eilat. I'll explain to you how to get to these sites, where they are, and what there is to see there. And hopefully you'll enjoy the virtual journey. So let's get started. We're beginning at my house in Old Katamon, from where we will fly using the wonders of Google Earth down to Eilat in a matter of seconds. For those who've never used the program, it's just fantastic. So here we are in Eilat. Now, Eilat has a very long history, and it's mentioned several times in the Bible, in the Tanakh. One of the first references by name is in the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 2, sentence 8. In this section, Moses is explaining the route of the exodus of Bnei Israel from Egypt through the Sinai, the Negev, the lands of Moab and Edom, and into Canaan. And in sentence 8, he says, and I'll read it, "We then moved on away from our kinsmen, the descendants of Esau, who lived in Seir, away from the road of the Arava, away from Eilat and Etzion Geber, and we marched on in the direction of the wilderness of Moab." Now, it's not clear if Eilat and Etzion Geber are the same place or located next to each other, but from other references, as we'll see later, we believe they are the same. What route was he talking about? Well, here's a map, and it shows the approximate route of the Exodus, as we believe it went. They came through the Sinai, came up to Etzion Geber once, did a loop through the Negev, came back down to Etzion Geber, that's Eilat, and then off into the lands of Edom and Moab. The second quote is also quite famous, and it involves King Solomon and King Hiram of the Phoenicians. Now, this was essentially one of the first joint ventures we see referenced in the Tanakh. King Solomon had a port to the south to the Red Sea. The Phoenicians were based on the Mediterranean coast and were seafaring people. Now, they knew that they could get gold from this place called Ophir, which is to the south, and the Phoenicians couldn't get there. King Solomon had the port, but didn't have the technology, so King Hiram showed him how to build ships and taught and manned them with his sailors, and off they sailed and brought gold back for the both of them. And here it says King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Etzion Geber, which is near Eilat. So here it says it's near, on the shore of the Reed Sea. We'll come back to that later, the question of the Reed Sea, in the land of Edom. So we've got the names Etzion Geber so far, Eilat and Eilat. And then in the second book of Kings, it mentions how Azariah, who was one of the later kings of Judah, rebuilt Eilat and restored it to Judah. Okay, so here it's called Eilat again. Now, it's a question where the name actually comes from. Some people believe it comes from the name of the tree, the Ela tree, okay, in particularly the Pistacia atlantica, which grows in this area here on this map. You can see that's native to the Elatarians. You'll find it over most of the country. There's another Ela here called the Ela Israelite, or the Pistacia palestinae, I think it's called, also known as a terebinth. It doesn't grow in the Eilat region, but it does grow in the Negev. Anyway, so something Ela, the plural would be Elot, and maybe that it's called Elot because these trees were found in the area. Another explanation that I actually prefer is that it comes from the word Eyal. Now, not Eyal, which is a ram or a goat, although it comes from the same shorish. Eyal means strong. What's strong about Ela? Well, some say it's because of the strong winds. After all, it's sitting on the Yam Suf, which we translate as Reed Sea, as we saw in that quote, the Red Sea, but it could be Yam Suf from the word Sufa, meaning storms. In other words, it's a stormy sea. So you've got the city of strong winds sitting on the stormy sea. You know, just a theory. But Eilat through history had many other names. We saw Etzion Geber, we saw Eilat, Elot. Josephus, who was a first century historian, called it in his book of Jewish antiquities, he called it the city of Berenike, or Bernice in English. Who and why was Bernice, and why did she merit having cities named after her? Well, Bernice, or Berenike, was the sister of Herod Agrippa II, who was the king of the area at the time of the Great Revolt. And she was an extremely colourful character, and I won't go into the details of her life here, but I recommend you do. You'll have a lot of fun reading it. Do it in the privacy of your bedroom without the kids around. That's all I'll tell you. What you see before you is an excerpt from what's known as the Pointinger map. Now, the Pointinger map was a map of the Roman Empire as it existed in the late Roman, early Byzantine period. It's actually, the one we have is a copy, a 14th century copy of what's presumed to be a 3rd or 4th century map, maybe earlier. And it shows all the roads and the routes around the Roman Empire. Now, what you see here is actually the section related to Elat. That's that there, Hela. They had taken the name of Elat and Latinized it, if you will, and called it Hela or Ayla. You can see Petra over here. Where are we? But the next question is, where was the biblical or the ancient Elat located? Now, we're now looking straight north up the Arava Valley. We've got, I'll zoom out a bit so you can see, we've got Elat to the left and Aqaba to the right. That's the hotels where we all stay when we go down to Elat. And here is a tell. This is the border, and here is a tell just on the Jordanian side of the border, known as Tel El Khalifa. It was excavated by an archaeologist by the name of Nelson Gluck, whose name you might know. He went on to found the Hebrew Union College here in Jerusalem, and he identified this site, this Tel Khalifa, as biblical Etzion Geber. Now, if you also see on the picture now, there's an area in Aqaba known as Ayla, which is the area where probably the Roman Byzantine city of Hela or Ayla sat, and this is again just the preservation of the name. But the modern history of Elat begins not over here, but over here at a place called Rashrash. To explain where we are, that's the old airport. This is the main road into Elat down here. You get to the roundabout, and opposite you is the shopping mall Mul Hayam, the Red Sea Mall. Behind it, on the coast, is a little plaza, and that is the site of Rashrash. And it all began on the 24th of February, 1949. Now, what happened on that date? That was the date Israel signed an armistice agreement with the Egyptians. Now, why was this important? As part of the armistice agreement, the Egyptians agreed to give Israel access to the Red Sea at Elat, and that's why the border sort of hits 10 kilometers or so south of Elat, down here. And also give us passage through the Straits of Tiran, unfettered passage through the Straits of Tiran. The armistice line chosen, it's not a border, it wasn't a border until we had a peace treaty with Egypt in 1979. So it's the armistice line chosen, was that one delineated between the British area of control and the Ottoman area of control in 1906. That was the line chosen. Now, why were the Egyptians so magnanimous? Well, because Israel had meanwhile, at the end in December, surrounded an Egyptian army in what's known as the Fallujah pocket. The Fallujah pocket is next to Kiryat Gat, Summit Plugot, Fallujah, Plugot, whatever. It was in that area, and they were stuck. So in exchange for letting them return to Egypt with their arms, Israel basically got this area. Unfortunately, Israel had a problem. At the time, by the way, all that was there was a few huts that the British had put up as a small police station. I'll show you a picture of it soon. Now, Israel had a problem because it had settlements in the Negev, but they were all much further north. They had nothing down this far south, and they were worried because the Jordanians had eyes on this area as well. Why? The Jordanians were led by the British, and the British were looking for some sort of land contiguity between all their colonies in the Middle East. So they had army bases in Egypt, they were in Jordan, they were in Iraq, and all the way through to India. They would have loved to have a contiguous land bridge between all their areas. And so Israel was worried that the Jordanian Legion would try and take this area before Israel could get there, because although we had signed an armistice treaty with Egypt on the 24th of February, we had yet to sign one with the Jordanians. So Israel decided need to establish a few facts on the ground and claim that land for our own. And on the 5th of March, they launched what is known as Operation Uvda, which means appropriately fact. 3 brigades of the nascent Israeli army were involved in this operation. The first was the Alexandroni Brigade. They didn't actually go down to Eilat, but they left Beersheba on the 5th of March, came down through the area of Dimona, down what is known as the Scorpion's Ascent. That's, if you've been to Martesh HaKatan, there's an old road which is from Roman times and probably even earlier, down which you can get into the Arava Valley. It's known as the Scorpion's Ascent. I think it was road 227. It's no longer accessible. It's been damaged by storms. Hasn't been open for a few years. I don't know if there are any plans to reinstate it, which is a pity. It's a great winding road down the wall of from the Negev plateau down to the Arava. Anyway, that's the Scorpion's Ascent. Maleh Akravim, as it appears here. The Alexandroni Brigade came down here and then headed north, and they took the Dead Sea. They took Stom, and they did an amphibious attack on En-Gedi. It wasn't much of an attack. There wasn't much going on. But they claimed this area, and that's how this area became part of the state of Israel. Meanwhile, the Negev Brigade headed down what we would call today Route 40 and then Route 12 towards Eilat, and the Golani Brigade headed also down Maleh Akravim and then turned right through the Arava. The idea was that if the Jordanian Legion, which was over here, decided to attack, they could protect the flank of the Negev Brigade as they charged towards Eilat. In the end, neither side encountered any Egyptians. There were no casualties on this particular mission. And it was simply a race down to Eilat. Who would get there first? That's the Negev Brigade. You can see they're already at Aqaba, 0 kilometers to Aqaba. And this is the Golani Brigade on their way down. And at 4 p.m. on the 10th of March, which was the 9th of Adar, Tashat, that's the 10th of March, 1949, the Negev Palmach Brigade arrived at Rashrash. You can see the buildings of Rashrash in the background here, and raised the flag for Israel, because that's what you do when you claim land, whether you're on the moon or at Okinawa or wherever, you raise a flag. Unfortunately, they didn't have a flag. They forgot to bring one. So someone grabbed a sheet, and on that sheet with a pen, they drew the Israeli flag, and it became known as the ink flag, the famous ink flag. And this is the raising of the ink flag. Here's another photo, which is probably more famous. That became famous because based on this photo, a sculpture was made, which we'll see shortly. It was later replaced with a real flag. Now, the Golani Brigade arrived 2 hours later. There were claims that somehow the Negev Brigade had set up obstacles in their path to slow them down, which doesn't really make sense if you think about it, because if the Negev Brigade got there in time to put obstacles in the path of the Golani Brigade, it meant that they got there first. In any case, the Negev Brigade won. And at 4 p.m. on the 10th of March, the War of Independence officially ended. That was the last operation of the War of Independence. And Israel claimed Eilat and access to the Gulf of Aqaba and through the Straits of Tiran. The armistice with Jordan was signed on the 3rd or 4th of April, a few weeks later. When they captured Eilat, the commander of the Southern Front sent this telegram to the government. I'll read it in Hebrew and then I'll translate. Ha'aviru lememshalat Yisrael liyom hagana liyud aleph ba'adar megishot chativat Negev Palmach v'chativat Golani et mifratz Eilat lemedinat Yisrael. Eilat Rashrash tet ba'adar tashat. Please pass on to the government of Israel. For the day of Haganah Day, the 11th of Adar, the Negev Palmach Brigade and the Golani Brigade present the Bay of Eilat to the state of Israel. Eilat Rashrash tet ba'adar 9th of Adar, Tashat, 1949. Now, what's interesting about this? Actually, there's a few things interesting about this telegram. The first thing is that the dates that this army gives, and this army is a secular army, are all the Hebrew dates. They don't use the Gregorian dates. They use Adar here, they use Adar there. Secondly, the telegram actually took 2 days to get there. They sent it on the 9th, but they knew that it would only arrive on the 11th, on Yom HaGanah. And the third thing that was fascinating to me was this Yom HaGanah. What the hell is Yom HaGanah? Never heard of it. Maybe you have. Turns out Yud Aleph Adar, Yom HaGanah, is the day commemorating the death of Yosef Trumpeldor in Tel Chai, which was the 1st of March 1920, Yud Aleph Adar at the time. Why was this named Yom Haganah? Probably because, for two reasons. First of all, it was an event that sparked the formation of the Haganah later in 1920, I think in September, October 1920. The need for a national defense force. Secondly, it's often recognized as the start of the armed conflict between the Arabs and the Jews. It's curious that we don't mention it today. Yural Vadar Yom Haganah. Anyway, thereafter, Eilat grew. It was a Ma'abara transit camp was put down there in 1951, and later it became a development town. An airport was built, an airstrip was built, the port was built. Water was initially brought in from Be'er Ora, about 10 or 15 kilometers north, by pipe from a well. When that wasn't sufficient or of good enough quality, they built a desalination plant, which was the only desalination plant in Israel till about 2009, I think it was, when we started building the new desalination plants along the coast. This is a picture from 1963. You can see not much was happening. The tourism only picked up in the late 60s, early 70s. And finally, in 1994, the Israeli government decided to make the site a National Heritage Site. The only one of the 5 or 6 British police station buildings that was left was preserved and is now a small museum. And next to it, you can see the statue that I mentioned earlier of the raising of the ink flag. If you can understand where we are, the Mall Hayam is to our right. That's, I think, used to be the Club Hotel. I don't know what it's called now. The sea is behind us. Anyway, that's the introduction to Eilat. And we'll continue in our next session with a few other sites in Eilat and then head off up into the Arava. Okay, see you later.